Hey, what's up? We're live. All right, today we're gonna mess around with vCluster platform and KubeVirt. So see if I can get this working. It's gonna be a live demo. I'll record a video on how to set this up and configure everything, and then give links to how to get that all done and what resources and stuff I have probably next week. So KubeVirt's a new thing that we added support for in the latest version of vCluster platform 4.1. Version 0.21 of vCluster, but it's been added, and there are options to be able to view it and stuff in the vCluster platform UI. But what I want to do is I want to create a virtual cluster, and then I want to deploy a virtual machine into it. Got two examples. Got one using a container disk, which is going to be like the super easy. Let me just get started with the KubeVirt example. And then I got one using a data volume. So a little bit of setup we got to do first. We got to set up KubeVirt. We got to get it installed on the host cluster. So I've already done that. Let me go ahead and show you within VS Code how you can do that. So this is just pulling from the KubeVirt documentation. This is my install script. I actually wrote a blog post too that I'll actually add to the description of this after the stream's over. So if you want to check out the blog post and kind of follow along, you can, until I actually have up some of these examples in GitHub. Anyways, so basically what we're doing is we're just installing it. So we're installing KubeVirt by saying, which version it is to get the latest version. And then we're creating it using the KubeVirt operator. And then we're also installing the CDI. Now, I also have a uninstall script. So when you're done with this, if you want to uninstall later, you can do that as well. So this will delete everything and uninstall it for you. What we'll start out with is, let's go ahead and take a look at one of the basic Ubuntu VMs that we're going to deploy. I'll show you some of the other stuff I've set up after that. Well, actually, let me show you, KubeVirt is running. So if we get the CRDs and we can see that we've got all the KubeVirt stuff installed. Now I haven't actually set up anything super advanced or anything like that. This is just running on a three node K3s cluster. So I got 3 VMs running, got 3 nodes. I've got vCluster platform installed on it, and then I've also got stuff like Metal LB. Right, so I've got Metal LB running. That way I can actually pull a IP address for a load balancer, which we're going to use a load balancer to go ahead and access it over SSH. Seems to be a little bit easier than using the virtctl SSH command. I had some issues with that when I was trying to connect. Maybe I was doing something wrong, I don't know. But if I expose it and I SSH to it with the key, there are no issues. virtctl will work for console though, so that's pretty helpful. So what do you need to get started with this? You need a Kubernetes cluster. You need to install vCluster platform. You need to install KubeVirt. You need to install virtctl so that you can interact with KubeVirt, and then like the vCluster CLI and that kind of stuff. That way you can do the commands that I'm actually going to run. So right now, if we vCluster list, we don't have any vClusters running. All right, so within the platform, what I'm going to do is first start out by creating a template. So to enable the KubeVirt, here, let me bring up the docs too. Hold on one second. And then let me make sure this is repeating. Get a little background music. The background music's too loud. Let me know. I'll turn it off. I just wanted something kind of in the background. Hey, welcome, Daniel. Yeah, I need to get chat up too, right? Like I'm getting used to using StreamYard again and streaming stuff. I'm just trying to get a little bit of content out about like how to get stuff set up. But yeah, if you feel free to comment, and I'll actually have chat up and pretend like I'm a real streamer. All right, so let me bring up the KubeVirt documentation real quick, and then I'll kind of show you what I've done here. All right, so if we go over here, what we can see is we've got this documented out for version 0.21. This needs to probably be stable. All right, here we go. So here's the documentation. So you can do a very basic setup, where you're not using data volumes. You can just set up integrations, KubeVirt enabled, and you're going to put this in the template that we're going to use. And then, so right, if you look up here, this is a platform tier, so it's not on the OSS version right now. So you're gonna need to install platform, free trial, all that stuff, and then you can play around with it and start using it. Maybe that changed feature, I don't know. Anyways, integrations enabled KubeVirt. So most of the integrations and stuff are kind of going to be platform stuff. Like we got integrations for Argo CD, KubeVirt, Vault, and some other stuff that's going to keep coming out. But what we're going to do is we're going to sync data volumes too, right? Because we want to be able to have actual storage behind it. We don't want to just say, hey, I want a container disk and I want to install on that. I want to install into an actual PV a volume. I want to use a volume. So I want to have a volume created. I want to download an image that I've already created maybe previously with other cloud vendors, like using OpenStack or something like that. and then I want to use that image. KubeVirt's not really like OpenStack in a way because it's like you don't have an image store and all of these other things kind of built up around it. So while it's nice and it's pretty awesome to be able to create virtual machines, you're still gonna have to build some of the stuff around it, right? Like you need to be able to host your images so that people can access the images. If we take a look real quick, I'm gonna kind of jump a little bit all over the place to kind of show you the data. But in the data volume, what I'm doing is I'm just pulling an Ubuntu image, like one of the latest Ubuntu QCOW2 images, which should have QEMU guest agents installed, which is what you're going to want to have installed before you start playing around with KubeVirt. That way you can inject SSH keys and all that. You can do it with Cloud Init and do it after the fact and install it that way, but it's easier just to have an image that's already created with the QEMU guest agent. That way you can, you can put stuff into it without having to actually write out a whole Cloud Init script. All right, so like the basic VM that I'm going to use is just going to be this Ubuntu VM. I'm going to create a secret. I have to update this. I think there's a bug right now where the secret key still references the host cluster. I already submitted that, so that should get fixed soon. But we're going to just use one of the basic KubeVirt container disk images for the first VM. So it's going to be a very, very basic VM, and then we're just going to do a console to it because we're setting the password with cloud config so that we can actually console in and we don't have to use an SSH key or anything like that. Now, with the more advanced one, I'll create a data volume. I'll import this image, and I'm going to give it a 10 gigs of storage, and then I'm going to reference that in this. Let me delete this too. I'll show you how to get this information after we actually set it up. I'm going to reference the persistent volume claim afterwards and actually just mount using that. So I can actually give it more storage. I can use my CSI and all that. I don't have anything special set up for the CSI or anything like that. I'm just using like the base built-in stuff with K3S because this is all demo stuff. It's not real infrastructure. This is just like in my basement. So, and then once we get that installed, what we'll do is we'll actually expose it. So expose it over a load balancer. You can use a node port if you want to, but I'm just going to do a load balancer just because I'm using MetalOB. I'm on-prem. I have unlimited load balancers. But if you're doing it in the cloud or something like that, maybe you don't want to use a load balancer. It's going to kind of get expensive. You can do like a node port, or maybe you want your users just consoling in or using virtctl. But I'll just use a load balancer for this example. So what do we want to do in the platform? Let's go ahead and hop over there. We will create a template. So I've already created a template. I call it vCluster Pro KubeVirt template. I'm using vCluster version 0.21.1. Maybe there's a blog post too. Let me link the blog post. Maybe that'll help. I'll put the blog post in the chat. And then I'll also put it in the description and stuff after this is over in case you want to reference it later. All right, but if you want to follow along, kind of this is what I've done. All right, there you go. Hopefully everyone can see that. There's a blog. So I wrote a blog post. It's got some of the same configuration stuff and everything in there, and then just a little bit more written around it. So basically what I'm doing is I'm doing a basic setup. So all this like sync stuff and all that, you don't have to really worry about that. What we're worried about is the integrations. So when I create the template, I need to have integrations for KubeVirt enabled, and I need to sync data volumes and have that enabled to true. And then I'll just save changes. Now I'm not doing anything special with sleep mode. I'm not doing anything special with like, high availability or anything like that. I'm just literally enabling this for KubeVirt for the demo. All right, and then save those changes. And then what we can do is go ahead and create a virtual cluster off of that. So this is the UI. This is vCluster platform. This is it's free tier, and it's also like part of our enterprise stuff and all that. But I'm going to create it this way. If you're creating it on the command line, usually you're probably going to use the vCluster YAML, and you're going to be using like Helm and stuff. Whereas this is literally a CRD in our Kubernetes cluster. Right, so virtual cluster templates, virtual cluster instances. So it's a little bit different than using the open source if you're used to that. But the vCluster YAML is actually interchangeable between these, and you can actually copy it in. I'll show you that while this virtual cluster is creating. So if you look at the actual template itself, and you look over here, this is the vCluster YAML information under values. So you can use that. All right, so let's go let that virtual machine go ahead and spin up. And then once it's spun up, what I'll do is go ahead and hop over to, I think I'll do this in Visual Studio Code. I don't know if you can, hopefully it's not too small. It doesn't look too small on my screen, but if it's too small, I'll hop back over to the command line and actually show it a little bit larger. All right, so it's still running, coming up. Hopefully, I mean, we're live, right? So hopefully the demo still works. I was working on this last week and seemed like everything worked, but I have to remember some commands too. Oh yeah, let's go ahead and after we connect, what we'll do is we'll create the secret. So we're gonna create a secret because And this one I'm actually setting up too, but I'm not going to SSH to it. Like I could set it up to be able to have SSH access to this, but for this first one, I'm not going to SSH into it. I'm going to console into it with virtctl. But with the other one, I am going to SSH into it, right? So within this, I need to actually reference an SSH public key. Most of these cloud images are not going to have password authentication set up to where you can just like log in with a password unless you're doing like console or something like that. SSHing in, you're going to want to have a key associated with it. And then like for the Ubuntu images, it's going to be Ubuntu. For Fedora, it's going to be Fedora. And I think for Ceros, it's going to be like Ceros. But I think Ceros literally does have password authentication on. It's just Ceros like Cubs win or something like that. But for this Ubuntu one, I want to go ahead and actually use a public key and then SSH with my private key. I'm probably have to delete stuff too. I bet I have stuff in my All right, so I bet I have stuff still in my my KubeVirt known host. So we'll see if that's an issue once we try to connect. All right, we're running. So now what we can do is we'll do this on the command line over here. We'll connect. We're going to connect here. It's going to port forward for us. And let me open up another one here. All right, so we're port forwarded. And now if we look at our context, we can see that we're connected to the vCluster instead of being connected to default. And if we get the namespaces and stuff, we can see that all the brand new namespaces and stuff are up, and then we're not on the host cluster anymore, which means we can hop over here and actually start creating some stuff. All right, so I'm in the directory. Let's go ahead and create the first one, which is going to be the super easy, just Ubuntu one. So let's go up an image. All right, it's this one. And then let's watch it until it comes up. Once the VM's up, what we'll do is we'll just use virtctl and we'll do a console into it. And then like I said, since we've set the password here, we're just going to use Ubuntu. So as soon as that comes up in the VM, I'll go ahead and use virtctl and show you what the console and stuff looks like. And then we'll just show that the VMs are running. Now remember, we're scoped to the virtual machine. So this is all running, or we're scoped to the virtual cluster. So this is all running in vCluster. It's not running, it is running on the host cluster, right? Like that's how it works, but it's running within the virtual cluster, which is like a layer up. I think previously, before we added this integration, there were some issues with like referencing stuff on the host cluster, which made it so that like you couldn't actually get the virtual machine running. So we had to do a little bit of work to get this running within the virtual cluster instead. All right, so let's give this a minute. I think maybe it's slowing down probably because I'm streaming too, but it's downloading that image. And then as soon as it started, like I said, we'll do a virtctl connect and kind of show like what that looks like. But then all right, so this is the one that we've actually just created. Then when we create the other one, what we'll do is we'll watch the data volume. The data volume is going to download that image and expand it into the disk. And then it's going to bring up the virtual machine and then connect it to that disk. Still, all right, it's taking a minute. So it's probably downloading that container disk image, which is going to be a little bit slower since I'm streaming, but we'll see if hopefully that'll go pretty quick. Anyone have any questions? If you have any questions, let me know. This is a live stream. I'm going to try to do some of these off and on, like I did one recently, kind of showing off the vCluster platform stuff. Maybe I'll show some other demos and things like that, and get used to the demos breaking and trying to troubleshoot live. Let me do something off screen, make sure that I have deleted all of my known hosts real quick so that I'm not connecting and there's known hosts. Yeah, so it's empty. All right, cool, we're good. All right, hopping back. Take your time. Yeah, it takes a little bit, right? Like it takes a little bit to download the image to get the virtual machine running. Virtual machines are a little bit slower than containers, right? Like especially if you're supporting developers, it's going to take a little bit longer to get those things running. I like KubeVirt. I think it's great for running virtual machines over here. I would still prefer to, if I could give a user a container for anything and let them like deploy containers, I would much rather do that than a virtual machine. Virtual machines add so much complication to users who aren't used to managing Linux machines, or think of it as like, a long-lived type thing where it's going to be up forever, right? Like, I mean, you can create great virtual machines on here. I think like there's a bunch of customers and stuff that are customers of ours that are using, virtual clusters to do container access to GPUs, but then also they're using KubeVirt to give access to, because you still need that. I think a lot of the telecom and stuff people, if they're moving over from something like OpenStack or VMs, something like that, they're looking into KubeVirt and seeing how they can use that instead, and seeing if there's any like slowness or anything like that. I will say the benefit of using KubeVirt on something like this compared to OpenStack is that as you scale, I haven't seen issues yet, although I haven't seen large scale KubeVirt besides maybe what Sivo I think is doing that. Large scale KubeVirt installs where, OpenStack and stuff like that, once you get to a certain size, you start having network issues and you start seeing issues with like RabbitMQ. Keep in mind, this is like 10 years ago that I was actually doing OpenStack stuff, but like in the larger customers, we were constantly, troubleshooting OVS and we were constantly troubleshooting RabbitMQ, seeing why like things weren't being consumed once they got to a certain scale. If you look at people like Walmart and stuff back then, they were doing Nova Network, which was just a flat network, which is more like Amazon's original EC2 stuff, where everyone's on a flat network, right? Like, and you don't actually have to set up a bunch of stuff. Yeah. So I think there are people using this at scale, right? Like KubeVirt is a great option, especially if you don't want to install all that extra stuff. Like you don't really need to have a huge, image repo. Yeah, here we go. Let's see. It's taking a little bit. I don't know if it's because I'm streaming or if like I've got other stuff going on. Let's troubleshoot. Let's see if Virt. All right. So what's going on with the Virt launcher? Oh yeah. Okay, that's okay. So this is the issue, right? I have created this virtual machine. So this is how you start troubleshooting. I've created this virtual machine. I am referencing a public key that's not found. So it's not going to launch because it's looking for that public key. I didn't create the public key yet, right? Like, cause I'm going to create the public key for the next one. So what we can do is let's go ahead and delete that. And then in like my blog post, actually take this out. Let's take this out. Let's get rid of these access credentials. And then we're just going to rely on passwords. And then let's create it again. And now we'll watch. But hey, at least we got to talk about like virtual machines on different things. Daniel, you can kind of reply to this. I don't think that KubeVirt yet is like, say you're going straight from VMware and you want to have virtual machines for everybody. KubeVirt is not that exact step straight from VMware to this, right? Like there's a lot of things that are missing with KubeVirt. They're gonna have to build around it to actually get it to the stage where your users that are, or your admins that are supporting, VMware or something like that are going to be able to actually troubleshoot and help users with it, right? Like VMware makes it super easy. If you're just doing VMs, you probably wouldn't move to KubeVirt. But if you want, to swap over to Kubernetes for everything, you're gonna have to build some stuff around it, like the image repository, maybe some other things too, right? You have to set up storage correctly. You're gonna have to look at like, how do I do live migrations and stuff like that. Like a lot of that stuff has been solved, right? Like it's not 2017, 2018 anymore. A lot of it's been solved and it's a lot easier. A lot of the work probably came from people that moved from OpenStack over here too, right? Like, and they kind of figured out, if I'm using Ceph or something like that, it's easier to do migrations and stuff like that because the backing store is just going to be set up. I just have to move where that pod's running and then reconnect to the storage on the back end. So, it's a lot better than it was before, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's something that you can sell to somebody as being hey, you're using VMware and you want to get rid of that license, come over to KubeVirt, right? Like I think OpenStack's more of kind of like the middle ground. But even that's still kind of hard, right? Like OpenStack takes a lot of work and a lot of configuration and setup. And then it also has kind of a different troubleshooting background than what you might have for like VMware, right? Like you have to go on the command line, you have to look at and read Python tracebacks and all that stuff to figure out what's going on. All right, so our VM's up, right? So got the VM up. That was the error message, right? Like best thing to do when something's not running is go look at the events and see what's going on, right? So my issue was that I had a secret key that was not actually created, so it couldn't actually mount that and get the key for SSH. But let's go ahead and get the VM, and then let's go virtctl console ubuntu VM. Oh, if I can spell it right. Here we go. All right, so we're connected, and then our login is just Ubuntu. All right, and now we got a VM, right? So we've got a VM running. The VM is running in a virtual cluster. So we got a VM in a virtual cluster. That's pretty cool, right? Like, but this is just a basic, hey, some user wants an Ubuntu VM to just like try something out. This isn't really, I'm a enterprise who has all of these images built for the cloud, and I want to use them on Kubernetes. So let's go ahead and actually do something more like that. Disconnect. All right, and then let's go ahead and delete this VM. All right, so let's move over to the next one. So the next one, what I need to do first is I'm going to create the secret. And then, like I said, there's an issue right now. There's a bug, it should be fixed here soon, where if I'm a user and I want to install and set up a virtual machine, and I just want to reference the secret name, I'm going to scope it to the virtual cluster, right? But for some reason, it's getting rewritten, and the kubelet's looking for, like, their message on the kubelet's looking for my pub key dash, stuff on the base cluster, right? So if we look at the base cluster real quick, so we'll disconnect from here, change our context back over to default, get the secret. Ooh, let's grep. And then we find, which one? Oh yeah, my secret, sorry. Grep my. All right, here it is. So like, basically you can kind of figure this out. So if you do a vCluster list and you look at the vCluster name, this is the workaround right now until it's fixed. So there's a vCluster name. It's basically just going to be my dash pub key dash default dash X. And then, because I'm in the default project right now. So if the project's different, it's going to be like, say it's developer, it's going to be the developer project dash X and then vCluster and then the name of the actual virtual cluster you're connecting to. All right, so let's connect back again. Which is a little bit annoying, but that should be fixed with an update, right? This is all kind of brand new that we just recently released, so bound to be some issues that can get past that, especially if most users are just testing with using like the basic stuff and they're not going in and using this. So what's the difference with the access credentials and SSH public keys and stuff? We're using some built-in stuff from KubeVirt instead of going down, and what you could do is you could just pass all this information in the cloud init instead. I kind of like doing it in the configuration. It's a little bit easier for me. I'm going to use secrets in Kubernetes instead of just passing in my public key using the user data, right? Like that's going to be much easier, right? Because I don't want my users to have to go learn cloud init if they don't have to. There's a bunch of stuff that they can do in cloud init. Like they can install. So like earlier on, I said you need to have the QEMU guest agent and all that stuff installed. You can do that all within cloud init. It's just going to happen after. So like I believe this stuff happens first. So like say you're down here and you include and say install the QEMU guest agent, and you just want to use the raw image of something like Ubuntu instead of using the QCow or cloud ready image. Well, it's not gonna pick up any of this information up here first, because it's gonna try to do that before it moves to cloud init, right? So it'll do all this stuff, it'll move to cloud init, and then it'll try to import that information, but it won't find it, right? So basically, you want a cloud image with the QEMU guest agent already installed. All right, so let's update that public key real quick. So this is what's going to reference here. And then what we can do is go ahead and we will create the data volume first. Let's make sure our context is right. We're on the vCluster. Okay, cool. Let's go to data volume and Ubuntu. I got examples for Fedora and Ubuntu, but Ubuntu is a little bit easier. So I'll use that. A lot of stuff's transferable over to Fedora though. Like most of it's not like that different. All right, so let's go ahead and create that data volume. And then the data volume. Okay, so the data volume is going to sit. The data volume is going to sit. Let's go here. So the data volume is going to wait for the first consumer. So it's not going to do anything. So you can create with data volumes and just have them sit until a virtual machine comes up for it that references it. But as soon, here, let's see, let's watch. As soon as this virtual machine gets created, the data volume is going to start importing that image, and it's going to give you a progress. And then what it'll do is create the volumes, and then you'll get a volume claim. So after the virtual machine comes up, it's going to claim that volume. But let's go ahead and show how that looks, right? So like this is the process. So if you're watching on Kubernetes versus like, OpenStack or something like that, and you want to see like the progress of like what's happening and how long it's taking to download the image, this is what you'll do. So let's create that Ubuntu VM, which like I said, this one's got a little bit more information. 2 cores, nothing really super special. Memory, just a gig. We could do way more than that if we wanted to. And then the claim for the claim name. That's some of the biggest differences are basically this, and then using the SSH public key instead of just using the password. I'm still using the password on there in case I want to troubleshoot something. But once you've got the images working, and you don't want people consoling in, instead you want them SSHing in, you can probably get rid of this and not actually have a password or have password off. But it's good to have some kind of password off for the console if you want to troubleshoot and figure stuff out. All right, so let's go ahead and create that VM. And then if we head over to this side, this could take a few minutes, right? because what it's going to do is it's going to create the PV, it's going to bind it, it's going to go ahead and start importing, and then it's going to give you the progress. So right now it's downloading this image that I've referenced in the data volume right here, right? So I'm just going and downloading one of the Ubuntu cloud images. So it's downloaded that, it's importing it, and then it's going to expand it. Let's get some water. And then let's go ahead right back over. All right, in progress. So as soon as it's done, so right now the virtual machine, all right, so you got the percentage of import happening right now. And then the VM is not doing anything yet, just starting. It's got to wait for that stuff to come up. And then what we'll do is we'll console into it, and then we'll SSH into it, right? So the console is going to kind of show you what's happening with like Cloud Init and all of that stuff. And it's going to show you like that it's importing the SSH keys and doing all that fun stuff. But that's kind of how you watch it. Like if this doesn't kick off or start, you just kind of look at the events on the data volume. Like maybe it's like, you know, it can't find the image. Like say the images or the URL is not reachable, then it's going to tell you, hey, I can't hit that, and I can't download that, and it's going to fail. But as long as it's reachable, as long as you can actually access stuff, let's get the PV and then get the PVC. All right, so I've got like a stuff running right here. So Scratch will go away, right? Like if you're used to OpenStack and stuff like that, you got Scratch disk, and then it should come back over here after it's all the way done. Let's go ahead and run over here. All right, so it's still starting. We can probably still, let's console into it. All right. And then this is kind of stuff you're going to be used to seeing when you're on the console of a virtual machine. Let's see if it'll let me log in. I think it's still doing a lot of stuff. Like I'm being oh, it's running. Here we go. All right, so now, yeah, it's like a virtual machine. So you're used to seeing this kind of stuff. But virtctl makes it pretty cool because you can console over it. You can VNC and that kind of stuff too. We're just going to show off console. We're going to wait for this to come all the way up. It's doing all of its boot up stuff, right? Like it's going to do Cloud Init. It's going to import the SSH key. It's going to do all that fun stuff. But keep in mind, this is a virtual machine running in a virtual cluster. So your users can launch, you know, KubeVirt VMs if they want to. You still need to have KubeVirt installed on the base cluster, but you're going to be able to run those VMs in a virtual cluster. I mean, it's not going to add latency because it's still running on the base cluster. It's just being able to kind of scope it beyond like a namespace and kind of, I don't know, contain it a little bit more. Here comes Cloud Init. We're going to put them keys in. Oh, there you go. That's what you, if you've done virtual machines, you've done Cloud Init, you've seen this thousands of times, right? So basically a lot of the stuff that you've done previously with Cloud Init and all that stuff is converted over to here. So you can actually still kind of do stuff. All right. This is all just like test stuff anyway, so it's not gonna. All right, so we're logged in via console, and we can see that we're in. We've got, you know, basically 10 gig disk kind of split up. Virtual machines running fine. Let's go ahead and get off of here and then show how we can SSH to it instead. So if we go over here, copy this out a little bit, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to expose this. We're going to expose it on, all right, so I'm running a MetaLB, right? So I've got like a little range of IP addresses, you know, I think like .15 to .20 on my local network. And I've exposed it over 16. That way I don't have to use, you know, a no port. But if you're using a no port, you could create this same thing. Like I think we can, let's expose it with a no port too to show what that looks like. Let's name it something different. And we got both, right? So now, like, we can connect to it either on this IP address. The thing about no port though is you need to know the worker node's IP address, right? Like to connect to it. So I'm doing a load balancer so that I get an IP address for myself that I can actually access. If you've got users, you need to give them like the worker node IP addresses so that they can actually SSH to it. If you're doing it on cloud, that's gonna be a little bit different, right? But now we should be able to SSH in. And we're in, right? So like, if we expose over no port 2, let's do the no port 2, just so you can kind of see that. So if I'm doing the same thing, I think it's 192.10. I think 10's my lower one, and then to go 30203. And we're in there too, right? So we can do it no port. We can do it over load balancer. Load balancer is gonna be a little bit easier. You just hand your users the IP address. You hand them the Ubuntu user. You've already imported, their public key and stuff in, and then they're just gonna reference their private key. But like, if you want to, you can create users on there. We're just using the base Ubuntu because why create users if you can just use Ubuntu? But if you have images that already have users, then you're just gonna apply those to the So if we go in, what has it done? I mean, it's basically done what you would expect with most things. So if we go into .ssh, it's in authorized keys now, right? There we go. Authorized keys. What else can we do? I mean, that's pretty much the demo. That's like the demo basically. Oh yeah, let's go over to the, let's go over here. So we can dig in here. We can see a little bit of information about, the virtual machine and the virtual machine. So virtual machine versus virtual machine instances, like running versus not running. But we can see a little bit of information about the VM here, right? Like we can show the YAML for the configuration and like how everything was set up and everything. We can update it and stuff like that. So you can do some kind of cool stuff here. You can also create a virtual machine instance from the UI. But I'm sure more features are going to be coming in eventually. It'd probably be nice to be able to console or something like that in. Maybe that's something that we add. So you can use a console and use the UI for it. But that's basically a virtual machine and a virtual cluster using vCluster platform. Yeah, thanks. It worked, right? Like it worked. That's the good part. There weren't any issues. I mean, I went through it. It probably took me a couple of days to actually go through it and get everything working and figuring out like, oh, it's referencing a key that it can't find, and then making sure that I have all of the configuration stuff set up. But the KubeVirt docs are really good. I use a lot of information from the KubeVirt docs and then just kind of modified it for what I wanted. So instead of using the Fedora, I want to use Ubuntu to kind of show a little bit of difference. But yeah, I'll put the blog post in the description. So like if you want to rewatch this, or if you just want to read the blog post and check that out, you can see it there. But also I'm going to make a better, like, I'm going to make a produced video so that it's going to be more like, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes walking through and showing the same stuff I did here. That way you can watch that instead, right? Like not everyone has like 30 some odd minutes to watch a demo unless they can watch it on 1.5 or 2 times speed or something like that. But I appreciate everybody watching. I'll try to do more of these live streams, maybe if they're of interest to people. Maybe show some stuff off with both the platform, which is enterprise, and then also some OSS stuff. But I like showing demos. I like showing like how to set stuff up. Like we got some other demos on our YouTube channel. Like if you go check out the vCluster tips thing, like we show how to set up Metal LB and some other stuff. I like doing stuff on Prim. I like working with cloud stuff, but I've got this fear of spending too much money on the cloud. So like I have a DL360 in my basement where I do most of my testing and demos and setup and all that stuff, right? Like, yeah, this is even the vCluster platform stuff that's running on Prim on my K3S clusters locally. It's like you can do that too. Like, right, this is basically all it is. So I've just got Proxmox running. Like I was a hater for Proxmox for a while until I was like, well, maybe Terraform with libvirt doesn't have as many features as I'd like to have. So I installed Proxmox. I'm using the Terraform provider to go ahead and create virtual machines. And then I'm just using Ansible to deploy, a basic 3-node K3S cluster. And then I just install stuff on top of it, like Metal LB, so that I have load balancers and stuff. And then vCluster platform, right? And this is kind of what I test around on. So I can destroy stuff, bring it back up. Like say I want to set up, Ceph or something like that. I can destroy it and bring it back up. And then Proxmox makes it super easy. Recommend, the free version of Proxmox if you're looking at stuff. I mean, I also, if you notice, I'm also using, VS Code instead of using, VI like I used to. I don't spend as much time on servers, right? Like, so like VI, yeah, it's awesome. I like using it. My friends still like use Emacs and all that stuff, but I've gotten lazy. I'm just a VS Code person now to where I can just edit stuff and then deploy it because I'm doing everything from my machine and pushing it out. Good to still have some VI knowledge if you're getting on the server and like trying to troubleshoot or like modify or set up, SSH configs. Like I spent like at least like half a day trying to figure out why virtctl would not use the key that I was referencing to SSH in using the virtctl SSH command, and I couldn't get that to work. I'm not sure why I couldn't get it to work, but I couldn't get virtctl SSH to work. So I started exposing instead of using virtctl. But like the virtctl stuff does have other options. Like you've got virtctl SSH, right? Like to where I'm on the Ubuntu VM. Let me make sure I'm actually somewhere that I can run virtctl. I don't have it installed there. It's like you've got the virtctl SSH command and stuff like that. So you can use that. But I just couldn't get it to work for some reason. I was, even referencing the right key. Didn't work. Anyways, exposing it is probably what you're gonna do for your end user anyways, unless you want them to use virtctl for everything. They can virtctl console if they really want to, but like I think most users that like VMs like using SSH directly to an IP address or a host name or something like that, which you could add a host name in front of it if you wanted to. But that's about it. I think got a meeting here in a little bit, so I think I'm gonna head out here in a couple of minutes. But if you have any, I'll hang out for see if anyone has any questions or anything like that. Let me link the, I don't know if this is just in the chat. Let me link the blog post one more time if you want to actually try this on your own and set it up. All right, link it one more time here in the chat. You might still be able to see it in the chat, like, and scroll back, but that's basically it. Thanks for joining. If you want to rewatch this video, feel free. If you have any questions, like if you set this up and want to find out more, have any questions, join Slack. You can reach me, Mike Peterson, and I should be able to help you out. But see you next time. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for joining the stream. It was kind of random out of nowhere. I'm gonna do a couple of random out of nowhere ones, and then I think eventually, like, maybe I'll start like scheduling some. These are just kind of like, let me show a demo and that kind of stuff, instead of just being like a webinar or anything like that. It's kind of like a hangout session to talk about like how to set stuff up. But we should have more streams stuff coming up. Probably do some with like SIAM and that kind of stuff too. But thank you so much. See you next time.